Career Paths, Psychology, Book 1, Unit 1, Psychology. Exercise 5, page 5.
State College, undergraduate degree programs, prospective students, psychology. State College has a comprehensive psychology program. All students begin with the functions of the brain. Students will also learn about various mental processes. Later, classes cover how these processes affect people's behavior. The program requires students to take several lab courses. Some labs focus on the mental effects from a subject's environment. Others examine the relationship between behavior and physical states. Students have two academic plans to choose from. One focuses on clinical psychology. This prepares students to assess and treat mental disorders. The second career path is academic. Students will learn more about research. They will also learn how to design experiments.
Unit 2, the Central Nervous System. Exercise 5, page 7.
Chapter 2, the Central Nervous System, CNS. The CNS is made of the brain and spinal cord. The CNS integrates sensory information from muscles and sensory organs. The brain processes these messages. Then, the CNS directs the body's behavior. The messages are transmitted through neurons. Some neurons are part of gray matter. They control cognition. Others are part of white matter. These are responsible for communication between parts of the brain. The spinal cord sends messages from the body to the brain. It also transmits messages from the brain back to the body. Sometimes, however, messages bypass the brain altogether. This is the case with reflexes. The spinal cord directs these behaviors with no input from the brain.
Unit 3, the Peripheral Nervous System. Exercise 5, page 9.
The Peripheral Nervous System, PNS. The PNS is divided into two separate systems. Both rely on sensory nerves and motor nerves. They send messages to and from the brain. The somatic nervous system. This controls the body's voluntary movements. The autonomic nervous system. This controls the body's involuntary responses like respiration. The autonomic nervous system is further divided. The sympathetic division. This system is more active when something threatens the body. It increases heart rate, for example. The parasympathetic division. This system is more active when the body is at rest. It is responsible for lowering the heart rate.
Unit 4, the Brain 1. Exercise 5, page 11.
Chapter 4, the Cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest division of the human brain. It has two identical hemispheres. These are on the left and right. The corpus callosum connects the two hemispheres. The cerebrum is further divided into lobes. They are the frontal lobe, the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the insular lobe. Each of these lobes has a different function. For example, the auditory cortex is in the temporal lobe. The occipital lobe is home to the visual cortex. The somatosensory cortex and motor cortex are near each other. They are located where the parietal, temporal, and frontal lobes meet.
Unit 5, the Brain 2. Exercise 5, page 13.
The lower brain. The lower brain is the area of the brain below the cerebrum. One major part is the brainstem. Its midbrain controls certain senses. It also controls the body's involuntary functions in the medulla. The pons connects the medulla to other parts of the brain. Another major part is the cerebellum. This is at the very bottom of the brain. It is largely responsible for the body's movement. In another part of the brain, hormones control behavior and emotions. There, the thalamus, hypothalamus, and pituitary gland regulate these hormones. The amygdalae also govern emotions. These are part of the limbic system.
Unit 6, Chemical Messengers. Exercise 5, page 15.
Psych 101, Class Handout, September 13. Chemical Messengers. Endocrine System. This is a series of glands throughout the body. These regulate the body by releasing hormones. Hormones. These chemicals make the body's cells perform specific actions. Example: insulin is one type of hormone. It regulates the amount of sugar in the blood. Neurotransmitters. These chemicals transmit signals from neurons to other cells. Example: norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter and hormone released in the brain. It regulates the functions of certain bodily organs. Example: an endorphin is a neurotransmitter and hormone released in the brain. It is produced during sensations of pleasure and pain. Neuromodulators. These are groups of neurotransmitters. Example: acetylcholine is one type of neuromodulator that controls muscle movement.
Unit 7, Perception and Sensation. Exercise 5, page 17.
State University, Psychology Department, Current Experiments. Students in the Psychology Department perform a variety of experiments. Their current focus is psychophysics. This examines perception through the transduction of sensations. In other words, it studies the senses. One recent experiment studied the effects of sensory adaptation. Volunteers were exposed to different levels of color variation. Students examined effects on color perception. Now, they are testing effects of sensory deprivation. Another experiment studied absolute thresholds. Students measured how well volunteers heard quiet sounds. They also measured barely noticeable difference thresholds. This involved the change from quiet sounds to louder sounds. Next, students are now designing an experiment to test selective attention. Subjects will focus on one image from a group.
Unit 8, Biological Rhythms. Exercise 5, page 19.
What happens during sleep? Sleep is important because it affects biological rhythms. Appropriate rhythms are essential to healthy bodily function. The body uses melatonin to regulate these important processes. The sleep cycle itself is a circadian rhythm. It should occur once a day. If it doesn't, the body could experience internal desynchronization. The sleep cycle includes several ultradian rhythms. These are known as sleep stages. They should not be confused with infradian rhythms. Those occur much less frequently. The most important sleep stage is REM sleep. This is when the sleeping brain differs most from the waking brain. During wakefulness, the brain produces alpha waves. During REM sleep, it produces delta waves instead.
Unit 9, Consciousness. Exercise 5, page 21.
Ask Dr. Nilsson. Dear Dr. Nilsson, I'm curious about people who walk in their sleep. Are they aware of their actions? Can they remember what they do? Bob in Braxton.
Dear Bob, when people sleepwalk, they are in an altered state of consciousness. In this state, they are neither aroused nor relaxed. While asleep, they experience a shift. They enter a state in which they perform automatic behaviors. When someone is awake, preconscious information easily becomes conscious. However, a sleepwalker's behaviors do not leave the unconscious. They remain subconscious after the person awakes. Therefore, most sleepwalkers are not aware of their sleepwalking. Dr. N.
Unit 10, Memory 1. Exercise 5, page 23.
Intro to Psychology, Chapter 9.1, Memory. Memory is the ability to store and recall information. There are various types of memory. The mind stores memories using information processing. This begins with encoding. Encoding prepares information for retention. Then, the mind stores it in one of three systems of memory. The three systems are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. The systems store memories for different durations. Sensory memory only lasts for a few seconds. Short-term memories last for up to 30 seconds. However, information rehearsal can extend short-term memories. Finally, long-term memory stores information for retrieval indefinitely.
Unit 11, Memory 2. Exercise 5, page 25.
Improving your memory. There are many methods of improving memory. One method is chunking. This splits information into small groups. That way, it is easier to remember. It's often used with sequences of digits, like phone numbers. Rote rehearsal is another method. It works because repetition helps store information. The mind creates acoustic codes. Then, echoic memory repeats them in a phonetic loop. The mind retains images similarly. Imagine staring at an image for a long time. This maintains it in the visuospatial sketchpad. Then, it stays in the iconic memory longer. These methods improve a person's conscious, explicit memory. Implicit memory, on the other hand, is harder to control.
Unit 12, Learning. Exercise 5, page 27.
Cognitive Psych Monthly, Volume 12. The work of Dr. Delilah Harris. Dr. Harris's work focuses on learning. As an undergraduate, she researched learning through repetition. This included conditioning and habituation. The results encouraged her to further explore associative learning in adults. She also wrote a paper on memorization. As a graduate student, Harris began to specialize. Her particular area of interest was play. She observed how play helps children with enculturation. Today, Dr. Harris continues to study children's play. Her current project focuses on psychomotor learning. It examines the cognitive development needed for physical skills. Her next project will address play and emotional development. It will be a targeted study of effective learning.
Unit 13, Intelligence. Exercise 5, page 29.
Psychology 232. The Psychology of Learning and Memory. Syllabus. Week 1. The course begins with General Intelligence, G. This is the most widely understood type of intelligence. Students will take sample IQ tests. Week 2. We'll examine criticisms of IQ tests. Are they fair? Can we design a test without cultural biases? Week 3. Introduction to the Theory of Multiple Intelligences, TMI. Week 4. Small groups will focus on different areas of TMI. The Linguistic and Logical Mathematical group focuses on language, numbers, and symbols. They will also examine musical intelligence. The Body Kinesthetic and Spatial group focuses on movement and building objects. The Interpersonal and Intrapersonal group examines society and self. Week 5. Groups will give presentations to the class.
Unit 14, Language. Exercise 5, page 31.
Psychology Department. Psycholinguistics Faculty. Dr. Edward Francis. Dr. Francis studies language in its smallest units. Some of his recent work focuses on phonemes. He is interested in how sounds denote meaning. His work also examines the relationships between sounds and concepts. This involves an examination of morphemes. Think about the S in dogs. Why does it mean more than one dog? Ask Dr. Francis. Dr. Gina Richardson. Dr. Richardson has a background in linguistics. She is most interested in issues of semantics. In particular, she studies how words connote different feelings. Dr. Richardson also teaches advanced grammar, which is a detailed look at English syntax and parts of speech.
Unit 15, Personality. Exercise 5, page 33.
What's my type? Use this guide to understand your test results. Please note, all results are approximate. One response does not always indicate a pattern. 1. Which activity do you prefer? A. Going to a party. B. Reading a book. If you answered A, you are an extrovert. If you answered B, you are an introvert. 2. What will the future be like? A. Good. B. Bad. If you answered A, your disposition is optimistic. If you answered B, it is pessimistic. 3. How do you solve problems? A. I tell people what to do. B. I wait until the problem goes away. If you answered A, your personality is aggressive. If you answered B, it is passive.
Career Paths. Psychology. Book 2. Unit 1, Emotions 1. Exercise 5, page 5.
Key to the emotion wheel. Understanding feelings is a complex process. First, you must understand the basic emotions. Robert Plutchik's emotion wheel, figure 1, is one model of basic emotions. Use this guide to understand it. Emotion. Yellow represents joy on the wheel. This is the emotion behind happiness. The light green section is for trust. Trust makes people feel generally positive about others. Fear is in the dark green segment. When people expect to be harmed, this is what they feel. Light blue is surprise. This is how someone reacts to something that he or she did not expect. Opposite emotion. Sadness appears in dark blue. This occurs when people are unhappy with events or circumstances. Disgust is in purple, across from trust. In this state, people experience a generally negative feeling about others. The red section represents anger. Angry people may want to harm someone for causing a particular event. Across from surprise, orange represents anticipation. It is a sense that something will happen.
Unit 2, Emotions 2. Exercise 5, page 7.
Psychology Majors Monthly. How to Talk to Your Patients by Professor Greenfield. As a clinician, you must determine how patients feel. This is often difficult. Sometimes people have trouble expressing emotions. Some may claim to be angry but are really experiencing disappointment. Others may mistake awe for love. Most feelings are complicated. They are the result of more than one emotion. Remorse, for example, requires emotions of both sadness and disgust. Other emotions interfere with the ability to communicate effectively. As a result, they are difficult to discuss. This is often true with aggressiveness and submission. Furthermore, feelings can change very quickly. Someone might feel optimism at the beginning of the day. Then, he or she receives news of a friend's death. Suddenly, the person feels extreme grief instead. The person might also feel anxiety about the future. On the other hand, some feelings take a while to change. For example, an employee might feel contempt for his or her boss. This may take years to become acceptance.
Unit 3, Motivation. Exercise 5, page 9.
Chapter 5. Motivation. Motivation is a complex field of psychology. It's also one of the most fundamental. As a result, there are many theories about motivation. Some theories focus on biological needs or drives. Drive theory, for example, suggests that people perform actions to reduce tension. The tension comes from unmet needs. Homeostatic regulation theory also focuses on biological drives. Examples include hunger and sex drive. Usually, these drives prompt instinctive behaviors. Other theories focus more on emotional aspects of responses. Arousal theory explains behavior as a way to manage excitement and boredom. It also provides a basis for curiosity. Opponent process theory also addresses emotional needs. It matches each positive emotion with a negative emotion. According to the theory, people seek positive emotions while avoiding negative ones. Theory of needs addresses both biological and emotional aspects of motivation. According to this theory, there is a hierarchy of needs, so a need for food is more important than a need for excitement.
Unit 4, Stress and Coping. Exercise 5, page 11.
Stress, a natural part of life. What causes stress? Everyone has different stressors, but some are more common than others. Positive and negative life events often lead people to feel stress. These include major events like moving, getting married, and changing jobs. The stress response. When a stressful event occurs, your body goes through 3 stages. The first stage is alarm. Your body fills with energy to fight the stressor. If the stressor still persists, the body moves on to resistance. The body still wants to fight, but it is losing energy. The final stage is exhaustion. This is an undesirable state of extreme tiredness. How to deal with stress. Your response to stress relates to how you perceive it. An accurate primary appraisal is very important. It helps you understand the nature of the problem. This ensures a realistic secondary appraisal or plan of action. Then you can cope with the stress more effectively.
Unit 5, Structuralism. Exercise 5, page 13.
Referapedia. Structuralism. Structuralism was one of the first schools of modern psychology. Structuralists tried to break down mental processes into basic components. They believed that systematic introspection would lead to empirical truths. A major area of examination was the senses. Structuralists broke down senses into elementary sensations. For instance, an elementary sensation of touching water was wetness. An elementary sensation of looking at the sky was blue. After finding multiple people's elementary sensations, they compared them. This dialectic was intended to reveal universal truths about perception. But many psychologists found flaws in the theory. They determined that structuralism's method of self-observation was fundamentally not objective. Different people reported wildly different elementary sensations. Consequently, the resulting data were not useful to analysts. Other schools of psychology emerged to replace structuralism. New, rigid methods left less room for feelings and personal bias. Today, Structuralism is studied largely as a historical theory.
Unit 6, Functionalism. Exercise 5, page 15.
James's Psych Blog, Functionalism, posted September 9. We are currently studying functionalism for my psych history class. It was an early approach to psychology. Its focus contained elements of pragmatism. In other words, functionalists placed importance on observable consequences. So they worked backwards, from the result to the cause. They identified psychological structures by examining the functions that resulted. According to functionalists, all psychological processes were adaptations to surroundings. Each process must have some usefulness in the environment. Critics argue that functionalism has insufficient focus. I tend to agree with this. Functionalism is good for analyzing active psychological processes. However, it almost completely excludes passive ones. In other words, it only looks at the actions that result from processes. But people process some information without an observable action. A passive process like disinterest can be difficult to observe. As a result, there is an overemphasis on active emotions. That's primarily why functionalism is not widely used today.
Unit 7, Behaviorism. Exercise 5, page 17.
1.4.0 Intro to Behaviorism. As the name suggests, behaviorism examines behaviors. It focuses on how we learn behavior as well as how we measure it. Behaviorists do not address internal factors such as thoughts. To some, this is strange. How can psychologists ignore thoughts? There's a logical answer. As scientists, behaviorists seek measurable events for observation. However, nobody can directly observe another's thoughts. So the study of thoughts requires speculation. This was not scientific enough for early behaviorists. That's why they turned their attention to observable behaviors. 1.4.1 How does it work? There are two major types of behavioral conditioning. One is operant conditioning. Many traditional experiments involved Skinner boxes. This was a form of animal experimentation. The boxes presented animals with shocks or rewards based on different behaviors. Another type is classical conditioning. This involves provoking a natural response to a stimulus. A famous example of this is the experiment with Pavlov's dogs. They learned the same respondent behavior for receiving food and hearing a bell.
Unit 8, Gestalt Psychology. Exercise 5, page 19.
Gestalt psychology is a school of psychology that studies the perception of patterns. People perceive objects in a holistic manner. Basically, people perceive objects as wholes, not collections of elements. Instead of individual objects in groups, people perceive sums. Criticism. Gestalt psychology engages in circular thinking. People perceive patterns because the mind perceives patterns. Gestalt psychology is based on several principles. Emergence is the idea that people recognize wholes before their parts. Reification involves adding information to a perception. This helps the brain interpret something familiar. Multistability is a tendency to interpret some patterns in multiple ways. Laws of Gestalt psychology. Law of proximity. People perceive objects that are near each other as groups. Law of similarity. People perceive objects that resemble each other as groups. Law of closure. People perceive shapes as whole when they are not. Law of symmetry. People perceive symmetrical objects as centered on one point.
Unit 9, Cognitivism. Exercise 5, page 21.
The history of cognitivism. Cognitivism is a school of psychology that became popular in the 1950s. It provides a framework for understanding the role of thought. Cognitivism first emerged as a response to behaviorism. According to cognitivists, behaviorism failed to account for the mind's internal processes. Cognitivists believe that the way people think affects their actions. In general, cognitivism takes a reductionist approach to psychology. Cognitivists believe that learning about individual mental processes is important. They feel that this will lead to a better understanding of psychology. Cognitivist experiments tend to study individual mental processes. One popular subject for experimentation is social interaction. For instance, cognitivists want to know how thought affects relationships. Another major area of cognitivism is animal psychology. Many cognitivists are interested in the mental processes of primates. One criticism of early cognitivist experimentation was its lack of naturalistic observation. Critics argued that this quality prevented sufficient scientific rigor.
Unit 10, Psychodynamic Psychology. Exercise 5, page 23.
Who was Sigmund Freud? Most people are familiar with the name Sigmund Freud. It's well known that he is an important figure in the history of psychology. But what exactly did he do? Freud proposed a very important psychological theory. This is the theory of psychodynamic psychology. Based on this perspective, the human mind, or psyche, has three parts. The id is the fully unconscious part of the mind. Its primary purpose is to seek pleasure. The superego controls a person's conscience. This drives people to attempt the right decisions. The superego is also mostly unconscious. The ego moderates the superego and id. It is based in reality and is mostly conscious. There is usually dissonance between these divisions. Too much dissonance can lead to maladaptations, such as defense mechanisms. Freud's goal was to resolve these conflicts. He used psychoanalysis to bring unconscious thoughts to a conscious level.
Unit 11, Evolutionary Psychology. Exercise 5, page 25.
Referapedia.com. Evolutionary Psychology. Overview. Evolutionary psychology is based on the principle of natural selection. It states that the brain adapts just like the body. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that the brain has a modular structure. Each part evolved to solve a particular problem. According to evolutionary psychologists, sexual selection is also a major determiner of human behavior. Methods. Evolutionary psychologists develop hypotheses in two main ways. Form to function starts with an observation of a behavior. Then, psychologists try to understand what problem that behavior solves. Function to form begins with the identification of a problem. Then, scientists try to determine how to solve that problem. Criticism and response. Critics point out that many claims lack testability. In response, evolutionary psychologists cite examples of cross-cultural consistency and universal human behavior. Their inference is that humans everywhere had to adapt in similar ways. This led to the survival of the same traits in different isolated environments.
Unit 12, Behavioral Genetics. Exercise 5, page 27.
Nature versus nurture. Psychology's oldest debate. Nature and nurture are commonly debated in biological sciences. Some people believe that the environment is most important to human development. Behavioral genetics, however, takes the opposite side. This discipline focuses on the traits that are hereditary. Behavioral geneticists take a reductionist approach. That is, they examine biological systems at their most basic levels. They focus on effects of genes in human behavior. According to these scientists, genes have a greater influence on people than we think. Reliable testing is especially challenging in behavioral genetics. Like other scientists, behavioral geneticists rely on the scientific method, and that requires just one independent variable. But no two people have the same life experiences. As a result, the control group can never contain aspects of nurture. However, some people do have identical genes, twins. So any differences must have direct causal relationships with environmental factors. That's why researchers often use twin studies for quantitative trait loci, QTL.
Unit 13, Humanistic Psychology. Exercise 5, page 29.
Intro to Psychology. Humanistic Psychology. Humanistic psychology is a branch of psychology that focuses on personal potential. It is a comprehensive branch incorporating elements of behaviorism, psychoanalysis, and other areas. Humanist psychologists believe that people are naturally good and have free will. They argue that individuals can consciously decide to actualize their potential. According to humanistic psychology, a person chooses his or her responses to perceptions. Patients seek humanistic therapy to help them overcome obstacles and succeed at something. According to humanistic psychologists, the key to self-actualization is acceptance. Patients learn to embrace their strengths. They also learn to recognize their limitations. These might include a person's genetics, education, and general cultural environment. The therapist supports the patient's self-acceptance with unconditional positive regard. Humanistic psychology comes with inherent challenges. It is largely based on an individual's unique perception of reality. That makes comparative, objective study very difficult.
Unit 14, Health Psychology. Exercise 5, page 31.
East University Psychology Majors. Health Psychology Focus. East University offers a comprehensive curriculum in health psychology. This program explores the relationship between a healthy mind and healthy body. The program trains students to become practicing clinicians. Modern psychologists understand that many biopsychosocial factors influence health. That's because psychological processes directly affect physical processes. For instance, many cultural factors can cause stress. This, in turn, causes the body to release cortisol. Over time, this hormone negatively affects the body. Students will study this and many other biological processes. Students will also research new developments in healthcare. This highlights the latest breakthroughs in the prevention of illness. Recently, students studied the relationship between socioeconomic status and smoking. A major scientific journal recently published their research. Another group is preparing to study the biological effects of social processes. They hope to discover how competition affects the immune system.
Unit 15, The Scientific Method. Exercise 5, page 33.
PCDC Lab. Abstract. Analysis of new anxiety drug. Introduction. PCDC Labs recently conducted a test of a new drug formula. Our problem was improving the effectiveness of an anxiety drug. The old formula reduced anxiety. However, it also caused severe side effects in many patients. We made a number of observations about patient reactions. Then we developed a testable hypothesis. Our experiment followed the standard scientific method. Hypothesis: reducing the active ingredient will make the drug safer. Process: we created an experiment with two groups. The independent variable was the amount of active ingredient in each pill. The control group received the original formula. In the experimental group, we reduced the ingredient by 25%. We then monitored anxiety levels as well as occurrences of side effects. Outcome: our results yielded a definite conclusion. The patients in the experimental group still experienced reduced anxiety, however, they did not experience as many side effects. Therefore, reducing the active ingredient made the drug safer.
Career Paths, Psychology, Book 3. Unit 1, Developmental Psychology 1. Exercise 5, page 5.
Intro to Human Biology. Physical Development. The physical development of humans begins at conception. During the prenatal stage, a human grows from a single cell into a baby. This stage involves many major physical changes. When a person is born, he or she enters infancy. This covers a person's first year of life. During infancy, a person begins to develop motor skills and hand-eye coordination. After about a year, an infant usually learns how to walk. This is when the child is considered a toddler. Toddlerhood lasts a few years, as the child develops coordination and motor skills. These continue to develop throughout early childhood. The next major stage of human development occurs between ages 10 and 12. Around this time, puberty begins. A person is now able to reproduce, but is still not yet fully developed. Growth continues during the next few years, known as adolescence. In his or her late teens, an adolescent reaches adulthood. At this point, the individual is physically mature. In general, adulthood is the longest period of a person's life. The stage of adulthood after about age 45 is called middle age. Finally, old age is the last stage in a person's life.
Unit 2, Developmental Psychology 2. Exercise 5, page 7.
Lecture Notes. Theories of Development. Cognitive development is the process in which someone learns to perform mental processes. Examples of these mental processes include logical reasoning, perception, etc. Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development is split into the 4 Piagetian stages. The first is the sensory motor stage. This stage includes the development of sensory perception and motor skills. The next is the pre-operational stage, during which children form concepts and communicate verbally. The third is the concrete operational stage. This is when children learn to use logical reasoning and manipulate imaginary representations of objects. The final stage is the formal operational stage, during which children think abstractly. Lev Vygotsky's cultural historical theory differed from Piaget's theory. Instead of emphasizing the child's age, Vygotsky's theory focused on the child's environment. The ecological systems theory also focuses on how a child's environment affects development. According to this theory, there are 4 types of environments: microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, and macrosystems. Microsystems include direct influences, and mesosystems are the relationships between them. Exosystems include indirect influences, and macrosystems include cultural influences. Attachment theory focuses heavily on the relationship between children and parents. It emphasizes the role of a caregiver in developing healthy relationships.
Unit 3, Cultural Psychology. Exercise 5, page 9.
The challenges of cross-cultural psychology. The main task of cross-cultural psychology is comparing cultures. However, it differs from standard cultural psychology. Cultural psychologists compare culture to identify their differences. On the other hand, cross-cultural psychologists seek commonalities between cultures. This is challenging because cultures do differ in a number of important ways. One major difference between cultures is communication style. For instance, high-context cultures often rely heavily on non-verbal methods of communication. Low-context cultures, on the other hand, do not. Cultures around the world also place different levels of importance on time. In a monochronic culture, following a schedule is of the utmost importance. However, in a polychronic culture, people place minimal emphasis on timetables and deadlines. Yet another important difference between cultures is how they define individuals. Individualist cultures define people based on personality traits and descriptions of the individual person. In a collectivist culture, individuals are defined by their roles in the community. But the complexity of individual cultures isn't the only challenge. Cross-cultural psychologists must also battle their own prejudices. It can be difficult to overcome one's own ethnocentrism. Additionally, stereotypes about other cultures can lead to mistaken assumptions. A psychologist must overcome these obstacles to conduct a fair, unbiased cultural study.
Unit 4, Social Psychology and the Individual. Exercise 5, page 11.
Psych 240. Social Psychology. In this course, we will study the important field of social psychology. In general, this branch of psychology studies how society influences individuals. We will focus on the way society shapes personal attitudes. In this course, students are encouraged to share their own life experiences. The first half of the course addresses social cognition. This area of social psychology focuses specifically on mental processes. Our discussions will concentrate heavily on the process of impression formation. This includes one of the major drivers of human behavior, social comparison. We will also examine the biases that occur during impression formation, including person positivity bias. Then we'll analyze the complex factors that contribute to cognitive dissonance. The second half of the course will focus on theories of attribution. These examine how people explain their own actions and those of others. A major component of this field is the influence of formal biases. As we'll discuss, people often overemphasize environmental factors in attribution. This occurs in both the fundamental attribution error and the actor-observer effect. Finally, we'll review a recent study on self-handicapping. This is a type of self-fulfilling prophecy in which people prevent their own success.
Unit 5, Social Psychology and Groups. Exercise 5, page 13.
How groups behave. When people are in groups, their individual behavior changes. For example, two students are solving a simple problem. While solving it, they know they are being observed by others. Social facilitation causes one student to solve the problem quickly and without error. However, another student might fail in the same situation. Social inhibition causes this student to imagine the possibility of embarrassment. Both students were given the same task, but the presence of observers affected their behavior in different ways. Group polarization and groupthink are especially common in groups sharing an interest. There's often a group belief system or agreed-upon approach to issues. This structure relies on conformity, compliance, and obedience. Members may share an interest in altruism. Consequently, they all donate funds to the same organization. On the other hand, the existence of a group can also be harmful. Extreme conformity can lead to de-individuation. In emergency situations, the larger the group, the less likely an individual is to act. The bystander effect occurs as a result of diffusion of responsibility. Each individual believes someone else will take a necessary action. Eventually, no one acts at all. But in any case, the existence of a group affects an individual's behavior. Sometimes the results are positive, and sometimes they are negative.
Unit 6, Research and Experiments 1. Exercise 5, page 15.
East University. Departments and Programs, Psychology. East University's Psychology Department has a rich history of research and experiments. Studies at the university provide information on the student population. Data from these cohort studies inform faculty of the state of the university. We believe this is necessary to provide the best opportunities for our students. Consequently, we focus on both correlational research and statistical research, or descriptive research. A recent cross-sectional study concentrated on our athletic program. Conducting research on the entire program would be difficult to accomplish. Therefore, we only followed one team throughout one term. We gathered quantitative information from various sources. These statistics showed the team's qualitative differences during the year. Our ultimate analysis demonstrated the need for stronger leadership on a team. Additionally, we noted the need for players to take on different roles. Currently, we're analyzing a longitudinal study of the senior class. We polled them regarding their educational experience as well as their career goals. That makes this study both retrospective and prospective. We hope to see a causal relationship between curriculum decisions and career prospects. That information will allow us to tailor courses better to students' needs.
Unit 7, Research and Experiments 2. Exercise 5, page 17.
Psychology Monthly, Ethics in Research. All forms of experimental research require responsibility and oversight. Of course, regulations differ depending on the type of research or experiment. However, there is always an ethical or moral justification for the regulation. Researchers must act accordingly, regardless of the experiment. When dealing with a human subject, the subject's age is important. Any study involving minors requires consent from the parents. The researcher should conduct an interview with the family before research begins. This is a chance to establish defined boundaries for the study. If anyone is uncomfortable, they can choose not to participate. An animal study doesn't have the same ethical concerns as a human study. That's why some studies begin with an analysis of primates. Primates are similar to humans but are studied under different ethical guidelines. Often, field experiments are favored over the laboratory for an animal study. Confining animals in a laboratory can be uncomfortable and possibly unethical. Also, it doesn't provide the same benefits as an observational study. A natural environment is the best place for real-world results. While discovery is important, research should avoid putting its subjects in danger. Ethical regulations are important and ensure research does not cause undue harm.
Unit 8, Research and Experiments 3. Exercise 5, page 19.
Research assistant needed. Content Industries is looking for a research assistant for our field team. We specialize in content analysis and computer simulation. Data collection is the foundation of our work. As a research assistant, you'll work with members of the data collection team. Responsibilities: performing an archival search at the beginning of each study. This is used to create our pre- and post-study computer models. It aids in our meta-analysis and streamlines our process. Selecting subjects from our target demographic. Ideally, this group should be a random sample, but sometimes we'll need a particular selection of respondents. Adequately explaining instructions for self-reports before respondents complete the study. Qualifications: the ideal candidate will have experience administering a survey. You should have an understanding of how a case study is analyzed. This is not a requirement, but it is preferred. We require some experience characterizing data. Knowledge of the different levels of measurement is a bonus. Otherwise, we'll train you regarding the following: nominal measurement, ordinal measurement, interval measurement, ratio measurement. If you're interested, complete the application on our website. We will contact qualified applicants to set up an interview.
Unit 9, Mental Disorders 1. Exercise 5, page 21.
DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The DSM is a manual that defines and classifies mental disorders. It provides researchers, clinicians, and many others with standardized criteria of these disorders. This lets clinicians diagnose patients consistently and accurately. It also allows people to learn more about abnormal psychology. The APA published the first edition of the DSM in 1952, and the manual is still subject to occasional revisions. For many years, the DSM used a multi-axial system of diagnosis. In this system, clinicians separated patients' symptoms into several categories, or axes. Although the multi-axial system is no longer used, some of its principles still apply. For example, on one axis, clinicians noted symptoms related to a person's mental state. On another, they identified a patient's overall level of functioning. Clinicians still assess these factors, but they do so in a more holistic manner. There are some critics of the DSM. They say that it labels conditions that are not really mental health disorders. Others argue that it is unreliable and often inaccurate. However, the DSM still has widespread support. Supporters point to the DSM's consistency with international standards. Its diagnoses correspond well with the ICD, published by the WHO. The DSM continues to be a primary resource for clinicians, researchers, insurance companies, and drug manufacturers.
Unit 10, Mental Disorders 2. Exercise 5, page 23.
Shale Valley Mental Health Services. Dr. Friedman's Notes. 9 a.m. Leah Nelson, new patient. I met with Miss Nelson this morning. She is clearly suffering from some kind of anxiety disorder. She did not display or mention any particular phobias. She also did not present any symptoms of panic disorder. I asked her about severely traumatic events in her past. She responded that she had none, so it's unlikely that she has a stress disorder like PTSD. At this time, I feel fairly confident with a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. I scheduled another appointment to explore her condition further. 10 a.m. Hector Bloom, diagnosed with OCD. Mr. Bloom continues to improve his ability to control his compulsions. He reports that his obsessions are diminished, which suggests that his medication is working. I feel optimistic about his continued recovery. 11 a.m. Gertrude Collins. Referral from mental health facility. Miss Collins was recently released from the county mental health facility. She was admitted last month for severe depression, and she is now on a course of mood-stabilizing medication. This looks like a clear case of a mood disorder. But her problem isn't strictly depression. She also exhibits periods of energetic and irresponsible behavior. I'd like to explore the possibility of bipolar disorder.
Unit 11, Mental Disorders 3. Exercise 5, page 25.
Mental disorders. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenic disorders. Schizophrenic disorders are the root of many social and emotional problems. People with schizophrenia display a range of symptoms. Various subcategories reflect common patterns. The most commonly diagnosed form is disorganized schizophrenia. This is indicated by various disturbances in thought, speech, and behavior. Catatonic schizophrenia and paranoid schizophrenia are often more pronounced and can be severely debilitating. Some cases of schizophrenia do not follow one particular pattern. These are tougher to assess and are classified as undifferentiated schizophrenia. With the right treatment, many schizophrenic patients live normal functional lives. However, with any type of schizophrenia, some symptoms typically remain. This is called residual schizophrenia. Dissociative disorders. Dissociative disorders involve problems with memory or identity. For example, some people experience dissociative amnesia. They lose parts of their memories following a traumatic event. It might cause a dissociative fugue. This causes someone to travel to another place without remembering why. Another well-known dissociative disorder is dissociative identity disorder. It occurs when a person switches from one distinct personality to another. Mental disorders in children. The most common diagnosis in children is ADHD. Other disorders like autism fall into the broader category of PDD. Many children have some kind of PDD. Major disturbances like depression and schizophrenia are rarely diagnosed in children.
Unit 12, Mental Disorders 4. Exercise 5, page 27.
Symptom chart for personality disorders, for reference only, not intended for use as a diagnostic tool. Disorder. Symptoms. Paranoid personality disorder. The main characteristic of this disorder is a person's general distrust for others. A paranoid person believes that other people intend to harm him or her. Schizoid personality disorder. The central features of this disorder are dysfunctional relationships and isolation. The schizoid person does not desire social interaction. Schizotypal personality disorder. This disorder is characterized by disturbances in thinking and perception. Antisocial personality disorder. A major feature of this disorder is deceptive, manipulative behavior. Other symptoms are trouble with relationships and hostility. Borderline personality disorder. Emotional instability, low self-esteem, and trouble with relationships are typical symptoms of borderline cases. Histrionic personality disorder. People with this disorder are often deceitful, controlling, and jealous. They place exaggerated importance on themselves and their emotions. Narcissistic personality disorder. This disorder is indicated by extreme notions of self-importance. Other symptoms include hostility, depression, and unfairly blaming others. Dependent personality disorder. The main symptoms of this disorder are relationship problems, poor self-image, and anxiety. Dependent people constantly need others for validation, support, and direction. Avoidant personality disorder. An avoidant person is generally afraid of how others regard him or her. Consequently, this disorder involves avoidance of personal relationships and interactions.
Unit 13. Treatment. Exercise 5, page 29.
Westview Treatment Center. About us. Westview Treatment Center is a full-service provider of medical and therapeutic treatments. We practice free association or psychodynamic therapy in most sessions. What we do. All of our psychoanalysts possess MDs. That means they can prescribe antipsychotics, antidepressants, and tranquilizers. We do not, however, perform invasive medical procedures on site. Patients requiring psychosurgery or electroconvulsive therapy are referred to a specialist facility. We recognize that each patient is different. We supplement each course of psychoanalysis with additional appropriate therapies. Treatments and programs. Behaviors and depression. We have excellent specialists in behavioral therapy. This focuses on the thoughts and feelings that cause certain behaviors. For a more in-depth focus, we offer cognitive therapy. In that program, we work to resolve negative thinking and self-esteem issues. Personal growth. Humanistic therapy and existential therapy focus on personal anxieties. We work on confronting issues such as ambition, responsibility, and isolation. Group sessions. Some patients benefit from interactive therapies. That's why we offer group therapy. Some patients find comfort simply in knowing they are not alone, and they can learn from each other's experiences. Family therapy is also available to help families resolve conflicts and support each other.
Unit 14. Applications. Exercise 5, page 31.
CareerNow.com Psychology. So you're pursuing a psychology degree, but maybe you're not sure what to do with it. Career Now is here to help. There are many exciting fields for psychologists. Many psychology majors practice clinical psychology. While this is a common field, it's not the only option. For example, school psychology uses clinical and educational psychology to improve the educational environment. Psychologists in this field work with students, educators, parents, and community members, and that's just one way to help your community. You could also pursue community psychology. There, you'll focus on the relationships amongst individuals, communities, and society at large. Just like schools and communities, the workplace also needs psychologists. Industrial psychology and organizational psychology relate to businesses and personnel matters. These fields primarily deal with industry, business decisions, and human factors. They're also used in occupational health psychology to address workplace-related health issues. In psychology, new fields are always emerging. Sports psychology is a relatively recent field that combines kinesiology and psychology. It's ideal for those who already have a hard science background. Additionally, forensic psychology and legal psychology are fascinating fields that explore criminal justice. So what will you do with your psychology degree?
Unit 15. Career Options. Exercise 5, page 33.
Job board by industry. Academics. East University is looking for an academic psychologist. Responsibilities include empirical research, and regular publication in scholarly journals. We prefer a candidate who already possesses a PsyD or PhD, but we will consider graduate students who are still finishing a doctoral degree program. Click for full posting. The Arbor Academy is interested in a school psychologist and a psychometrician for temporary contracts. We need fully qualified candidates with an MA or specialist license. The psychologist will help students achieve performance goals. Click for full posting. Private firms. A major multi-product brand seeks a consumer psychologist. You must understand different marketing strategies. The psychologist will assess and report on poorly performing products. Click for full posting. A full-time engineering psychologist is needed for temporary project. This regional firm recently doubled in size. However, we cannot afford to upgrade to a larger office space. We need ideas for organizational and ergonomic improvements. Click for full posting. Government agencies. Winfield's Air Base requires a military psychologist. The primary responsibility is to evaluate military personnel before deployment. Click for full posting. The Department of Education needs a consulting psychologist. The job involves the assessment of educational structure in public schools. We prefer someone with experience as a clinical psychologist or counselling psychologist. We also require an Ed.D. Click for full posting.
AVN Pharma Education.